3 and 2 are where we get to the ones that I like the best. First, these should have been number 1 to me, but number 3, this makes so much sense. Widen the court and have a uniform 3-point line. I was at Sloan Analytics conference, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, and they were talking about how space is a premium in NBA games. And they had a whole thing on soccer and finding space in soccer. And like, as it is now, the corner 3-point lines, these guys are gigantic human beings. And you could even see, like, back when JJ Redick played, I had a conversation with him about hunting his shot and how much different it is when he would get into the corner. And he's like, your footwork has to be really great when you're in the corner. And JJ isn't nearly as big as some of these dudes. He's big enough. He's an was a professional NBA basketball player. But his whole point was, we have big feet and there's not a lot of space between the 3-point line and out of bounds. And you have to really be careful with your footwork. Widen the court, number 1, makes sense because these guys are so gigantic. You're going to create more space. And then the corner 3-pointers aren't worth more in terms of, like, it's a shorter distance. It's uniform all the way around. You're going to prevent guys from camping out in the corner.
Yeah, there's precedent for this too. In the mid-90s, the NBA did use a uniform 3-point line. The difference was they shortened the line so that it would be the same distance all around as it was in the corner. It was 22 feet around, because the NBA wanted more threes. So theoretically, the same effect would be you widen the court, you adopt a uniform 3-point line where it's the same distance as it is at the top of the key, and lo and behold, the corner is weakened, you've reduced 3-point shots. Now, to do this, you have to widen the court, and there's a business aspect to this where you have to take seats out of arenas to do that, because arenas only have a fixed number of space available, a fixed amount of space. I don't think owners want to deal with that. I don't think they want to lose tickets. But that is only one of the problems here. Then there's the basketball concern. We kind of don't know what it would do if we widen the court. That just has so many possible downstream effects that we're not going to be able to measure until we see it. If anything, you could argue that it makes it harder to play defense because suddenly there's more space to defend. I don't know is the big answer to this. I don't have a good answer for what this would do.
I think those are legitimate concerns. The biggest one being that, tough to part an NBA owner from his money, but we're not talking about widening it to soccer field width, right? We're talking about widening it, on the margins. And I don't think it's going to be so prohibitive that it would create too much space and make it so impossible to play defense, or that they'd really lose that much money in the aggregate once, like, you widen it. I'm sure that they'll figure out a way to cram in extra seats. I like this one quite a bit because the uniform 3-point line, now all of a sudden you're preventing exactly what we talked about. Guys running to the corners and just standing there. God bless Tobias Harris. He'd probably be out of a job, but this is like, that's the part I hate the most right now about the NBA is just like, guys are going to run to the corners and camp out there, and it sucks. That part sucks. But if you don't want to widen the court, this is the one that I like the best. This is number 2. And I think that this would also create more movement, which is 3 in the corner. We take the concept of 3 in the key and we apply it to the offensive player in the corner, 3 in the corner, and you can go to the corner, but you can't camp out in the corner.
Exactly. Now, something we've talked about a fair bit throughout this show is that not all threes are created equal from an entertainment standpoint or a value standpoint. Sure. A 3-pointer where PJ Tucker is spending 20 seconds sitting in the corner is very
PJ Tucker
different.
Catching so many strays on the show.
Well, he's kind of the poster boy for the does nothing on offense but shoot corner 3. So sorry, PJ, we love you, but this is not going to be a kind show to you. There's a big difference between those threes and, like, for those of you who aren't X's and O's junkies, San Antonio has a play called Hammer, which basically is a very elaborate action designed to create a movement 3 in the corner based on a screen coming up from the corner. Those plays are really cool. I want to see Manu Ginobili take that 3. Like, that's a really exciting corner 3. If you introduce 3 in the corner, you take away the PJ Tucker camp out 3s, but you still leave the corner available for teams that want to create corner 3s creatively. That, I think, would be a net good. The issue that I ran into with this was enforcement. Think about the flopping tech that they introduced last year. When was the last time you saw one of those called? Like, it was big for a couple months, and then it kind of just faded away because it's pretty hard to enforce in the moment. I think if you're going to enforce 3 in the corner, you probably have to add another ref, which I don't know that the NBA wants to do. Now, that's just a money issue, but it's a, meaningful one if you're adding several refs to the budget. And remember, when you talk about 3 in the key, there's one key, it's in the center of the court, and
Yeah.
it's usually pretty close to where the action is. The corner, there are 2 of them, and it's kind of removed from a lot of the play most of the time. I think you would have a whole lot of situations where there's a big shot, and then all of a sudden the game ends on Twitter. You're looking at the video, and it's like, oh, my clock had it at 3.4 seconds in the corner. That should have been a tech, and it shouldn't have counted or whatever. Like, you run into a lot of problems that way as well.
All right, I think that that's valid. All of those are valid, but with 3 in the key, it's more 3 in the key isn't like strictly reffed, right? It's not like hard 3 seconds. Like you see some guys here, they got a foot in, they're kind of like messing around. Joker's the master.
Brooke Lopez.
Yeah, Brooke Lopez, Joker's the master of it, and like the refs are giving him a side eye. It's mostly just the threat of 3 in the key. Like if you're being egregious about it, you're gonna get slapped with it. I think the threat of 3 in the corner is how it would be reffed, right? Where it's okay, if you're going to camp out there again, looking at you, PJ Tucker and Tobias Harris, and you've got concrete boots and you haven't moved in half an hour, you're going to get the 3 in the corner called. But for most teams, I think just the threat of it is going to keep their offense moving, right? And that's really even just starting with something simple like that, where it's like, okay, we know that this is a problem for the NBA. It's kind of boring on top of it. We want to get you guys in motion. If you're egregious about it, we're going to hit you with it. And I think that would just like start them down a path.
So producer Aaron brings up a useful question here, which is where exactly would the 3 in the corner line go? And you would have to draw separate lines on the court. There's like a little rectangle in the corner that shows like this is where it is. But like drawing another line on the court is a pretty small issue. It's very doable. I think this is the one that you could most plausibly test at the G League level because the playing style is broadly similar. You're not having to change courts. You're not having to like drastically change the way the game is played. This is one that I think if the NBA decided we want to start testing this next year, it would be a pretty simple matter for them to do it. So yeah, I think among the solutions that are realistic, this is probably the likeliest. I personally have one that I like more. It's just a little bit more fantastical.
Yeah, I think before we get to that one, where would the line be? It would be where the break on the arc is, right? When it becomes a flat line, that little chunk of, hey, the real estate becomes really valuable and there's not much room there. That's that whole section there on both sides ended up being like 3 in the corner. Last one here, the number one solution on your piece on cbssports.com is make threes worth 4 points. I hate this one. It's too much math. I was told there'd be no math.
So the broad answer to this is basically the reason that teams shoot so many threes is that 3 is more than 2, right? It's 3 as a number is 50% more than 2. If you change the scoring system so that 3s are now worth 4 and 2s are now worth 3, the difference isn't 50%, it's 33%. You haven't gotten rid of that difference altogether, but you've made it much smaller, so the value gap has suddenly shrunk. Now it's much more viable. What about free throws, though? Well, that's the other one we're going to get into.
Yeah.
The issue with there is free throws, where you're not going to stop the game for 3 free throws every time somebody gets fouled, right? Like that's just, it's too slow. It's not going to happen. God forbid you have a 4-point foul where somebody's taking 4 free throws. You can't do that. I personally am in favor of some change to the free throw method, where a lot of people suggested, you take 1 shot for 2 points. Maybe that's something you do here, where you take 1 shot for 3 points, or you do something where you take 2. If you make 1, you get 2. If you make 2, you get 3. There are solutions to this that you could test out, but this is the solution that doesn't actually change basketball. It doesn't change the court. It doesn't change the rules. It's literally just you get more points for doing different things. I think where you'd run into a lot of opposition here is from the fan experience, right? Like, do fans want guys averaging 40 points a game? Do fans want Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point record, which has stood for, 60-something years at this point, to fall based on a rule change? I think the answer would be no. It doesn't change the basketball itself, but it really changes the way that fans engage with it.
Yes.
And that could raise a lot of problems. But personally, as somebody who looks at the NBA as more of a competitive product than entertaining product, I love this idea.
I would argue that this changes things more radically than the two ones that we just hit on, which is widening the court and the 3 in the corner. I mean, like those to me are like incremental changes. This is like from a consumption standpoint, an entertainment standpoint, records, all of those things that we like about the game. Yeah, sure, the court looks the same and the basketball looks the same, but now the math and the stats and all of that I think are radically altered. The other ones are just like little tweaks. I want a little tweak here.
Yeah, that's why I think 3 in the corner especially is like
Yes,
the
that's
easiest
that's my
one for
number
them to
one.
implement. It would require the least testing, and it's one
Mhm.
where like you try it for 2 years, it doesn't work. It's so easy to get rid
What's
of.
the big
Whereas
deal?
like
Right.
if you change the scoring system for 2 years, suddenly the top 20 scorers in NBA history are all coming from the same 2 year period. Like that's something that you can't undo quite as easily. Now, my official position on this is like, guys, be grown-ups about it. Like we know just because DeMar DeRozan is suddenly averaging 34 points a game, that doesn't make him better than Michael Jordan. But like that's my position on it. I understand that fans aren't going to be as quick to adopt that. Like I don't know how fans would feel if every game was suddenly 156 to 151.
Oh, we'd never hear the
It
end of it.
was last year, and then lo and behold, the NBA changes the rules because people didn't like it. I think it would be probably too hard for the casual fan to accept, especially when you have people who are only checking in for a few games a year being like, oh, I'm watching the finals and wait, why is that worth 4 points now? How does this work? So
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite. I don't think it's the most plausible.